Yep, I'm just. Hello, everyone. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes here. So probably close to about 11:02. I want to just give everyone an ample opportunity to get signed in and everything. I'm kind of new to this myself, so just making sure everyone's got the technology part down. If you have any questions, then just feel free to use the chat. I'm kind of running this on my own, so I'll try and manage as best as I can. But anyway, just a little bit of patience and we'll get started, let's say 11:02. Thanks so much. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started today with the webinar about about SBIR STTR and it's kind of a 101 kind of beginning session here. I guess kind of right in bold it says first session in a series, and the idea here is to just kind of help people prepare, have kind of top level information, whether they're entrepreneurs or university researchers or what have you, to learn a little bit more about this kind of federal funding mechanism. It's in many cases a pure grant program, and to then help people prepare for the SBIR Road Tour, which is making a stop in Omaha later this year. I guess before we get started too much, I probably should do a couple housekeeping things. First of all, I uploaded the PowerPoint that I'll use today as a handout. So I'm not exactly sure what you're able to see on your screen. I can only see the presenter screen here, but there should be a little section where handouts are available, and then you can download those, and then any of the live links or whatever that are in this presentation you'll just have access to, and then I'll send the PowerPoint at the end of this as well as kind of a follow-up. So that thing there, and then also if you have questions as I'm going through, just feel free to use the chat function and it'll alert me, and then I'll read the question and make sure that the rest of the group hears the question and then respond as best as possible there. So I'll also help in terms of as much as possible with the technological problems if we have any, and try and troubleshoot those on the fly. That is kind of my nightmare, so hopefully we'll keep those to a minimum, and this just goes really smoothly. But anyway, that's kind of how this next hour or so will work. So again, SBIR STTR 101, housekeeping things are out of the way, and this is the first in a series that then you will participate in, obviously, if you would like, to help you and your company kind of prepare for the SBIR Road Tour, which is coming up later in 2020. So as this, like I said, it's a series. So as initially conceived, the Road Tour was supposed to make a stop in Omaha on June 1st. So we were kind of hot on it. We thought we would do some of these introductory ones starting in March and a little bit in April. Then in May, people would develop quad charts, practice their pitches, and then be all ready to go June 1. Obviously, given the current situation, the Small Business Administration decided to move the Road Tour stop from June 1st, and actually it will occur on October 19th. So that's hot off the presses, just new information for ourselves, and now I'm passing it along to you. So just be aware that the Road Tour for 2020 will still include a stop in Omaha. We still kick off the Midwest leg of the SBIR Road Tour 2020, but know that it occurs on October 19th. Given that, we're going to do a lot more of these kind of SBIR 101s between now and September. So there will be announcements about other SBIR STTR 101 training sessions that you can attend, but you'll have attended this one. So unless you want to hear the information again or whatever, they'll all be pretty similar. The only thing that's different in the series will come up then in September. So September 17th, 18th, 24th, and 25th. Those should be Thursdays and Fridays. During those 2 weeks, what we want to do is kind of have an interactive session, and preferably it would be in person, because I think that will have the most impact. There will be a quad chart, and I'll go over that later, what that needs to look like. But there'll be a session where you kind of come with your quad chart. We kind of go over best practices, what needs to appear there, and then it's a work session. So then we have some time to actually make those edits, review it, maybe share it with peers and things like that to see how it's looking, and how other people react to it, because that's really the test, is that you know your technology, you can convey your technology, and you understand it to maybe other people within your company, but does it make sense to an outsider or someone who's uninitiated? So that's really what we would focus on there, and how to develop a quad chart. Not only is it my preference to have those in person, I think it leads to richer discussions if we can have them in person as well. They're happening either way though. So if we have to do them via Zoom, then there's a way that we'll just do those via Zoom, and it'll have to be a virtual session there in terms of working on your quad chart and getting that delivered. Then the same thing down here would be the prepare to pitch. So the concept here is that you learn about the SBIR Road Tour, the SBIR program, and things like that. We've got plenty of time to work on the homework that I will give you at the end of this session. I bet you didn't think you were going to leave here with homework, but it's not too burdensome, I promise, and now we've got plenty of time to work on it. Then there's the 17th, where we kind of work on and refine our quad charts. And then just another opportunity, preferably in person, but potentially via Zoom. Then October 1st, 2nd, and 5th would be an opportunity to just kind of do a dry run of what those 15-minute sessions on the road tour would kind of look like. So getting the time to talk through your quad chart, what kinds of questions should you be asking, and make sure that you have a really great sense of what those 15-minute sessions will feel like. So it's not like you're going in completely cold and having to make some sort of really intensive pitch or whatever, when it's actually closer to a conversation with the program manager. So those are what we're trying to do here to make sure that people who are participating, whether they're companies, researchers, just kind of interested in the program or whatever, people feel as though they're prepared for what is coming. So the agenda for today, I'll provide SBIR STTR program information so that you learn more about the about the federal program, kind of how it works, how it operates, the eligibility requirements for participating companies and researchers. Then I'll get into a little bit more details of the SBIR Road Tour for 2020. And then I have about 3 small little homework assignments. And like I said, we've now got plenty of time to work on those. And the Nebraska Business Development Center is here to help you between now and the Road Tour to make sure that those things are completed and done and you're ready to go. And I guess I should say right off the top as well, for those of you who do not know, that the services available from the Nebraska Business Development Center are available at no charge. So if you want your quad chart reviewed, or you would like someone to help you look for a federal solicitation or anything like that, those are all things that this office can do, and we're happy to do it. And we can help you navigate those things. And at no time would you then be asked to pay anything, we won't run your credit card or anything like that. So I just wanted to make that little pitch there as well with the Nebraska Business Development Center. Okay, so SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research. STTR is Small Business Technology Transfer Research. And it's a federal program. It's a competitive program, meaning that you have to submit an application. And the idea is for small businesses to solve industry problems. So in an innovative way. So especially with the grants available through this program, there a lot of times the federal agency is not specifying a solution. They're not saying we have this problem to be solved in this particular way. They're kind of saying we're the National Institutes of Health. We speak with healthcare providers all the time. We are the USDA, and we speak with farmers or ranchers all the time. We're the Department of Energy, and we speak with energy producers or energy users all the time. So we have a good sense of what's going on in our industry, what's happening in a regulatory environment, and all of those kinds of things. And we've identified a problem. This is our problem. This is our challenge. So do you have a way to solve that solution or to solve that problem? Propose a solution. And we will prioritize small businesses and provide them with funding because we like the solutions that they've proposed. So that's really what it's looking for. It's the competitive part is more on the solution that you're proposing. So a solicitation, as I mentioned before, if you're more familiar in the government contracting space, a BAA, broad agency announcement, sources sought or what have you, a lot of that government contracting words, they're very similar. It's just kind of, we're a federal agency, we have this problem, we need to set aside some of the solution to be provided by small businesses, and tell us how you think you could fix it, why you are the small business to provide that solution, and here's funding to be able to do that. So as you're proposing your solution, the idea here is that you don't have something, you think this is how you would solve it. And so that's where it's a program that's organized in 3 phases. One is just the phase 1 is to establish feasibility. And again, it's very project based. You're kind of a project manager over these 6 months. Funding not to exceed $150,000. And what you're doing is saying, you have this problem, National Institutes of Health. You have this problem, USDA. I, as this small business, think I could solve it in the following way. I don't know that I could solve it in the following way, but I'm pretty sure, I think so. The science seems to be there that over the next 6 months, I would conduct the tests, do the interviews, deliver the report, whatever that deliverable is, to establish the feasibility. This solution could work. So you have phase 1 to do that. Maybe you don't need $150,000. If it's National Institutes of Health or something, I think those caps can be a little bit more flexible depending on It varies somewhat from agency to agency. Some projects are going to be more expensive than others. And so it's just kind of you're building that budget to say, you know, to pay yourself, to say, I'm going to work on this project. You know, I need to subcontract with this provider, work with this manufacturer or whatever. And over the next 6 months, we're going to establish that this solution could work. So then at the end of your phase one, either your solution works, which would be fantastic, or maybe you know, conduct some tests and it really doesn't work. You think maybe it could work if it were refined, you know, some other way, or it just doesn't work out whatsoever. So if it just doesn't work at all and you're working with the program manager and things like that, then phase one may have been the end of it. You built a prototype, the prototype failed spectacularly, and you're just going to have to move on to a different idea. Or you could say, oh, no, my prototype worked fantastically. It's amazing. Or it mostly worked, but I need to make the following refinement. And both of those latter categories would be perfect for then moving on to phase two, which would be continuing that research and development. There's 2 years to do that. And then funding does not typically exceed $1 million. Like I said, some of these caps can change somewhat depending on the agency. Clinical trials and things can be very expensive. And so there might be a little bit more flexibility on maybe a National Institutes of Health or something in terms of those caps, or even, you know, the amount of time it takes to complete that research. But generally speaking, across all of the federal agencies that do this program, you need phase one to establish feasibility. Phase two is to continue that research and development. And hopefully there, by the end of this 2-year cycle, and really by the end of your 2.5 years, you have a deliverable. You have something, you have a product, something that, you know, kind of works within, you've made some industry contacts or whatever, it kind of works within the overarching system, and that you're ready to really move into phase three, which is the commercialization. So you've got this new thing, new product, new system. It could be services, you know, but a new way to deliver those services, you know, some sort of innovative twist that will, you know, have broader impacts within the marketplace. And so that's where there's no funding attached to phase three. It's strictly commercialization. And the idea here is that maybe you've, during this time, attracted venture capital, maybe you're generating sales revenue and things like that. And that's really what is supporting your business operations at that point. But your phase one and phase two, there is funding attached, because the idea is that that's what's getting you from idea to then commercialization. It's now, you know, appropriate to then talk about Nebraska's individual support for this program. And the idea here is that there will be a review panel that you know, kind of technical review from the commercial aspect of it, the commercial potential for this idea, as well as the technical feasibility of this idea. So that'll get reviewed. The science as well as the business case will get reviewed, and at the federal level. So then if that's approved, and your NIH scientist or your USDA scientist or whatever, your NSF business reviewer or whatever, goes through and says, yes, this project should work, then Nebraska's Department of Economic Development is, you know, would say, well, who are we to question that review panel or what have you? And so it's kind of a, there's matching funds available from the state. So that would be either phase one and phase two grants will match federal SBIR up to $100,000 or $65,000 of the federal grant. So if you were to receive $150,000 from phase one, from the federal government with that grant, then whichever's less, either $100,000 or 65% of that grant amount could be added to the funding. So you end up, at least in phase one, you know, close to doubling your money. Well, 1.65 ving your money with that state support. So that's very helpful. Certainly in phase one, that gives you some room to maneuver, maybe hire additional staff, or another contractor or consultant or something like that that can really help make sure that the phase one is successful. Phase two, $100,000 doesn't, in the scheme of things, add so much to an award that nears $1 million. That's not so much in addition, but again, that's an additional lab technician or another battery of tests or something like that to really that can be helpful, certainly. And the other thing I want to mention is that they also have phase zero grants. So a lot of small businesses have just never written a grant before. And then if that's the case, or it takes time from someone who would otherwise be working at the business or working in the business, that then they need to write the grant or what have you. And so then there's $500 or $5,000 that can be reimbursed per project for the costs incurred that go into preparing your federal phase one proposal. So just know that money and that support is available as well, and it's an email to Nebraska's Department of Economic Development, specifically Nisha Avey, to talk with them about accessing those funds, which are currently tapped, but their fiscal year begins July 1, and so those funds may, rather soon here become available again. So I'm just going to pause for a second to see if anyone has any kind of basic questions about how the program kind of works there. But I am running a little bit shorter on time than I anticipated. So I'll move on here to the differences between, I did say SBIR and then also STTR. And really the biggest one there is what percentage of work is done within a small business and what percentage of work then can be done with like a research laboratory or maybe a university partner or a nonprofit or something like that. And in both cases, it's small business. So the applicant needs to be the small business who receives the funding. But how much can be subcontracted varies by what type of mechanism it is. So the SBIR, a much higher percentage of that work needs to occur within the small business. So if you're proposing a software solution or something like that, the small business itself would need to be doing more of that programming, more of that coding and things like that. If it's an STTR, a greater percentage could be subcontracted to potentially a research institution. So if you're, again, I guess going with my example of developing a piece of software, then maybe you could work with a university department, or you have a professor that who has kind of lab capacity or something, and so they could use some of that funding within their lab to work on your project. So that's kind of how SBIR and STTR, that's really the critical difference, is what percentage of that work, of that deliverable, is kind of done within the small business, and how much can then be, can a partner institution kind of go forward and do that. So the PI down here, kind of looking at the bottom of this chart, that's the principal investigator. So the applicant might be the small business, but in the case of an STTR, maybe your principal investigator is actually, because they're overseeing like a critical piece of the project, you might want your principal investigator to then not be employed, or you want them to be at the university or some sort of research institution, even though it's the small business who is the recipient of the grant. And then really, because of this kind of, the time and effort is split between a small business and a research institution, that's where a little bit farther up the chart, we've got IP allocation agreement required. Well, if most of your work is being done within the small business, then you don't necessarily need to decide who owns what intellectual property. So that's a difference there. there's less fuzziness if it's the small business applying, the small business receiving these funds, and the small business doing a lot of the work. Great. That makes it very clear that the small business owns whatever intellectual property is generated from this project. That gets a little bit more complicated when you've subcontracted with another organization and they've done critical aspects of the project or overseen critical parts of the deliverable. That just means that before the funding is distributed and dispersed and things like that, that there needs to be some discussion about who owns what at the end of the term of the grant. So 6 months in would not be the time to kind of have the lawyers battle it out about who owns what, and you should anticipate that would be a point of discussion kind of earlier on. So it's really just the percentage of work that's done. So STTR allows up to 60% of that work, which means the small business could do as little as 40% of the work on the phase 1 project. With an SBIR phase 1, no more than 33% of the research can be subcontracted. So then 66% of the work needs to happen within the small business. So that's a big difference. So critical to think about what you're planning to deliver, your capabilities within your organization, and so then that would help you determine which is the appropriate route for you. This is also a good time to kind of give a plug for the SBIR tutorials. That link, sorry, it doesn't appear so clearly there, but sbir.gov/tutorials really covers all of this information in much more depth, especially that difference between SBIR and STTR. I got that chart from here, but there are a lot of other kind of classes and little quizzes that you can take to ensure that you understand that information. But these tutorials are actually very helpful. One that I highly recommend too is actually under Program Basics, and it's contracts versus grants. So what I've mostly talked about is the grants. You apply for a grant, say this is my project, this will be my deliverable in 6 months, thank you for the cash, and you use that cash to build your prototype or do your thing. So that's great. And they're not looking in many cases for a specific solution. A contract is more restrictive. It's also possible that SBIRs also have contract mechanisms, but the milestones are more clearly defined. The deliverable is far more clearly defined as well. So Department of Energy, I think, does a lot of the contracting there, and they don't want you to say, we want to create, an alternative nuclear reactor or something. That's probably not something just me in my basement should be messing around with. And so they do a lot more contract things with clearer deliverables and milestones, and then also with in terms of intellectual property and confidentiality and things like that. Those are anything that's in terms of contracting with the federal government is going to have kind of restrictions there that you're going to have to adhere to. So to just know that that both are possible, contracts versus grants, and then kind of the positives and negatives of both of those. So it looks like we have a question here where someone's raising their hand. Let's see. Okay, so if you had a question, no sound for me all of a sudden. Huh? Is that okay? I can hear you now. Okay. All right. So I don't know what the problem was there, but hopefully it was only temporary and only I'm only for that one listener. But anyway, sbir.gov/tutorials. good discussion there, and I would highly recommend the contracts versus grants to go through. So I kind of gave the plug here for Nebraska Business Development Center. Our services are available at no cost. The other thing I wanted to discuss here is that for most people, especially small businesses, they've just never applied for a grant before. And so that's the thing that's the most challenging. I'm not going to say kind of confusing, because they navigate it just fine. It's just something that they haven't done before. So I just want to go over the quick key elements of an SBIR STTR application. And those items are in bold here. Those are the things that are probably going to take the most time, especially for small business applicants, will be the technical proposal. These vary agency to agency. Some can be as short as, kind of 6 pages to as many as 12. But again, what you're doing is you're saying, this is what I propose. This is the thing I will do over the course of this 6 months. The terminology changes, just like the page limits change from agency to agency. NSF asks for things like intellectual merit. NIH calls this same basic thing scientific and technical merit. So it's really, what is this concept? Can we apply it? So the question is, can we apply it at Nebraska Department of Economic Development now? And will they keep the application on file until they get funding? So right now at their website, they really just say, send them an email. So I would start putting together your application. And then the one thing I would definitely do is write Nisha or Ben Kuspa an email to just say, that you're interested in applying, and when would the funding be available, and just kind of ask that question. You can for the SBIR STTR matching fund stuff, there really isn't much of an application. You just show them the proof of funding, and it's kind of a no questions asked kind of situation. So as soon as you have the documentation from the federal side that says that you've been funded, really, they kind of need a warning shot across the bow that you would be seeking SBIR, and that you may in fact want this funding. Phase 0, again, not much of an application. You could just kind of write them now and say that you're interested in applying, and when would that funding become available. So Nisha's who you would need to talk to specifically, and it's Nisha, NISHA.AVEY @nebraska.gov. But I'll send that contact information out as well, just so that you have it. But that's who you would speak to. Okay, so thanks so much everyone for your questions and engagement. That's great. So key elements of the application here, again, technical proposal, intellectual merit, which is just this is my innovative idea, and this is why it's innovative. This is my, kind of novel approach. Products, or, all my competitors approach the problem this way. I am proposing a solution that tries to, address this problem in this other way. So just kind of, does this concept kind of hold water? This is what I seek to do. So that's the intellectual merit piece. And then because it's, a government agency, there's interest in, kind of the broader impacts, or that's what NSF calls it. NIH calls this as significance, which is great. It's for the sake of your company, for the sake of your product, this is novel and new and interesting. Cool. But is there commercial potential for it? Or beyond commercial potential, maybe the government ends up being the only buyer. You have some special drone or something that it could potentially only be useful to the Department of Defense. So you're not really establishing commercial potential there necessarily, but there is a broader impact. There is a significance. There's a societal benefit that you then could claim as well. So those are kind of the two key sections of then that technical proposal. What specifically are you trying to do, that you're trying to address? And then more broadly, why does that matter to society writ large? So those are the two things that you really need to speak to, because that's what the panel will be asked to kind of evaluate your application based on. So you want to go kind of work backward from the evaluation criteria. NSF will be, National Science Foundation will be reviewing my application based on intellectual merit and broader impacts. Great, I better make sure in my application I include a very clear section on intellectual merit and broader impacts. National Institutes of Health will be reviewing this proposal, and their reviewers will be asked about scientific and technical merit as well as significance. Well, I better make sure that those are very clearly articulated in my application as well. So those are the two big sections of the technical proposal that you 100% should cover for every agency. Whether USDA has different phrases, Department of Energy, same thing, but they get to the same basic idea. Okay, the other part that needs to be included in the application is your budget, and a lot of that's going to be labor. So in addition to answering what's the deliverable, your budget needs to say what will it reasonably cost to produce that deliverable. And your time, it has a value to it, and so that should be included in your budget. Over the next 6 months, you'll spend a certain amount of time working on this project. So you need to go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics to say, I'm an organic chemist, or I'm a project manager. I'm living and working in Nebraska. So my labor needs to be accounted for in this budget. So that's what, for the budgets I reviewed and looked at, a lot of it is, kind of the labor. What's the lab technician, the electrical engineer, the manufacturing costs, and things like that. And a lot of those associated are, a lot of the costs associated then involve the labor piece. And so going to the Bureau of Labor Statistics is really all you need to cite to say, in the state of Nebraska, it costs this much over the course of 6 months, paying for 20% of that organic chemist's time. This is what it would cost to get this project done. So that's really the key component there on the budget. And then, doing that homework to get price quotes and price estimates and things like that. Like I said, there's a definite time hook to these projects, and so there's a timeline there that needs to be included. Most, if not all, I guess, ask for a Gantt chart, which is, this one to the right is a pretty simple, straightforward one that just says, it breaks down your 6 months. So I received funding on October 1. 1 quarter from now, I will have achieved this milestone. 2 quarters from now, 6 months from now, I will have achieved this milestone and have this thing delivered. And so that's really how what you're trying to do is just break down month by month, quarter by quarter, the tasks that need to be accomplished and in what order, to ensure that by the end of the 6 months, you have your that report that says this project is feasible. You have that service, that like marketing plan, that website, that product done and ready to go. So with the timeline, what are the milestones to achieve that deliverable? And much like the application, working backward from the evaluation criteria, again, working backward from the 6 month deadline, and in the case of phase 2, working backward from that 2 years, what needs to be done at each section during each period of time to make sure that you stay on track. And so that's what the application is doing, is saying, this is my solution, and this is how I will use my time over the next 6 months to deliver on that solution. And because that will take time, then the budget is critical to that piece to say, this is going to be something that means that I can't work elsewhere, and so therefore, compensating yourself for the skills that you're bringing to the project. Okay, so like I said with the road tour, so that's the application. Again, NBDC can help with that piece, and I can go over any of these details, kind of offline individually with people who have questions about kind of how the program works, whether they're eligible, and any of the mechanics associated with any of the things that I've mentioned previously, whether it's technical proposal reviews, providing feedback on how those could be refined, looking at budgets, finding solicitations in the first place that you might apply to. All of those things are things that NBDC, the Nebraska Business Development Center, can help with. Specifically, in terms of an event, the SBIR Road Tour happens on October 19th. It has moved. If you're seeing things or you have seen something that said it was happening on June 1st, it's been moved 6 months. So, or longer. It's been moved out to October 19th. So these are the agencies that were invited previously. There are a lot of divisions, different divisions of Department of Defense, as you can see from this list. The last time they came, which is about 4 years ago, Department of Agriculture had a big contingent, as well as the National Science Foundation was represented as well. Not every topic area that is relevant. National Science Foundation covers a wide variety of topic areas, but it was one program manager. I think she represented kind of the health portfolio of the National Science Foundation. But she had discussions as a representative of the National Science Foundation, and then based on those, she kind of referred people over and appropriately and made the appropriate introductions to people, to other program managers within the National Science Foundation that had the appropriate portfolio. So kind of looking through this list here, this is who's been invited. And then about a dozen representatives will actually be at the Thompson Alumni Center on University of Nebraska Omaha's campus on October 19th, and that's a Monday. So they've been invited. They will show up on the morning of. Then there's about an hour, and I'll get into maybe the details of how the day actually works on the next slide. But the idea is that there'll be about 12 federal agencies represented, and there will be time for them to all make kind of their overall pitches for how SBIR works within their agency, and then to specifically take one-on-one meetings with people who are companies and researchers and things who are then represented there. The part I want to talk about in terms of the invited agencies is that these are people who are, they're not only thinking about the solicitations and the solutions and the problems that they're trying to solve through this program that are currently available. They also write the solicitations and the topics for the next round of funding. By the time it's published, it's been in the works for months and months. So by the time their interests show up at grants.gov for people to apply to, they've submitted it to their boss's 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 boss to actually, approve it and push publish. So for them, that's all kind of old news. They convene the panels and do the final reviews. So the face time is important, but they're thinking about the next funding round. And so to be thinking about that as well is that, sure, there might not be something that exactly fits at the moment, but the next funding window may open 6 months from now or 3 months from now. And could your discussion that you had during the road tour inform the upcoming solicitations? So to be thinking about it not so much as the timeline needs to work just right because you have a solution, it fits exactly this agency, you had a sit-down conversation, and then you applied, and then it just, kind of worked out perfectly that then you were funded. Because that's really not how that flow works for the vast majority of attendees. It's worth it to have then these sit-down conversations and kind of then an ongoing conversation in the months to come as other solicitations become available. So these are the invited agencies. And so you should be starting to strategize to think about, this is my innovation. What federal agency might have a problem that this innovation fits with? Just a special call out to maybe the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. They have a lot of buoys, and so you're thinking, well, we're not really a coastal community at all, so why would we apply for NOAA? But they do a lot of, they have a lot of sensors. They get a lot of data. So anything that kind of eases their data processing or data management systems or something is something that they're interested in. And so to think not just about, what maybe our preconceived notions of these agencies are and what they do. Department of Defense has a lot of funding as well, and they have a lot of people to feed. And so maybe USDA is a fit if you have a food technology, but Department of Defense might as well. And NASA represents a funding opportunity as well, especially in the food space, where you're, trying to maybe more efficiently grow a special type of food product, or a special, source of protein, or a new source of protein or something like that. And so those are all things that just to think a little bit more broadly about where your product or innovation might fit. So those are the invited agencies. And then all of this information is then available at the link above, nbdc.unomaha.edu/road-tour. And that's where we break down kind of how the day will look. So like I mentioned, there's kind of an SBIR STTR overview. Again, that's from the Small Business Administration, who actually administers the program. Then there's 5-minute reverse pitches from the agency, and that's the opportunity for each of these agencies to speak generally to the whole group and address the whole group about their funding priorities, how their program works, and things like that. There will also be a presentation from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office during this period, as well as the Federal Labs Consortium, because they have research capabilities as well. So maybe you're looking around University of Nebraska and you're thinking, well, I'd like to subcontract this project with with this UNL researcher or with a UNL researcher, but I don't see a fit, or they don't have my specific capability, or they don't have the capacity at this time to do it. Well, there's, we have the United States government federally funds labs as well, who may have the capacity to be a partner with you. And so that's, I think that'll be an interesting talk as well. But then simultaneously happening throughout this entire morning will be the one-on-one meetings. So what you'll do when you register, you'll register with us first through Eventbrite. There's a fee associated with that. So I want to be upfront with that, because, mostly just for the covering costs kind of idea of hosting people in that space. So that there's an Eventbrite link available at this Road Tour website. Sign up there, and that's just to kind of help cover costs associated with having the Road Tour come to Omaha. So there's a registration that occurs there. Then once you're registered with us, then that's it. We will pass along our list of registrants to an organization called Dawnbreaker, who contracts with the Small Business Administration, and then they will work on the one-on-one meetings. So they'll send you emails to say, help us prioritize who you actually want to meet with, and we will do the work to set up the one-on-one meetings and kind of optimize the meeting times with the different federal agencies, who is interested in meeting with them, and making sure that all of that part goes smoothly. And anybody who you want to meet with, you don't have to pick just one federal agency. You can have multiple meetings, and so you just kind of prioritize. You think you have a food product or something that USDA could fund, but maybe NASA, maybe Department of Defense also could be interested in this new concept. So then that's what they're there to do, is make sure that you're getting the one-on-one FaceTime that you're looking for. So that's kind of how the whole morning will go. Then there's the Nebraska Startup Resources, where that's an opportunity to meet with maybe Nebraska Department of Economic Development, like the participant today had questions about. An opportunity to speak with them one-on-one, Invest in Nebraska and things like that will all be available at that time too. I think it's really important that we have debrief sessions because yes, there's the opportunity to learn from federal agencies. There's opportunities to work to interface with Nebraska Startup Resources, but you guys can learn a lot from each other. So if there are, UNO researchers or somebody from Creighton who has a research interest that might fit a local company's research needs, then I think it would behoove us to ensure that those kinds of connections are made and that those kinds of things happen. So I just want to make sure that there's kind of a general debrief session that also occurs where people can kind of share notes, share what they're working on, and then also kind of discuss what they heard. And then also when you register through Eventbrite, kind of picking a facilitated workshop that fits your choice or your interests. So some of it's going to be very technical in terms of completing required registration. So will be presented by the Nebraska Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Funding options, Invest Nebraska, as well as the Small Business Administration will present about that. So if that's your most pressing concern, then that would be something you'd want to participate in. New Tech Ventures will discuss navigating intellectual property. And if you're affiliated with the university, kind of who owns what and how do you have those kinds of tough conversations. And then we've also developed kind of an online course that is what we're kind of pitching as project management for your SBIR submission. So for most people who haven't submitted a grant application before, it can be kind of daunting. And so what we've done is we have kind of this online course that goes week by week and provides assistance and guidance to make sure that you keep on track over the 3-ish months that really it would take to submit. You could cram it all into 2 weeks, but it would be kind of a hectic 2 weeks. So we thought, well, if we break it up, 3 months sounds like a long time, but it means that each little task is a little task. And so you can deliver that, have a little bit of homework. It's not much of it's not really an online course with lectures and things like that. It's just, kind of some homework assignments to keep everybody honest. So that's kind of how we envision the road tour. It's moved dates, but is basically would break down about the same. So just one last thing. No, sorry, I've got a couple other things. Sorry, but one last time to kind of talk about this as a series. Just know that this is kind of our introductory session. There will be more of these throughout the summer. You can always get in contact with me kind of personally, and we can do, kind of custom sessions too. And as you work on your homework assignments that I'm going to talk through in just a minute here, but then also know coming up in September and then in October, there will be opportunities for you to further refine your quad chart and then also prepare to pitch so that, again, here with the one-on-one meetings, that it's that it's useful to you and that you go in prepared, not nervous, and to have this good conversation with the federal program manager, and then and really feel like what you got out of that meeting was valuable. So the last thing I want to talk about now, for real, the last thing that I was going to mention is the homework for the next workshop. And we have months until September really for you to do that, and I'll send little prompts and reminders and things like that. But we have 3 items that are going to be really helpful to you applying for SBIR generally, but then also participating in the SBIR Road Tour specifically. So the first thing is to identify agencies that have funded innovations like yours, and I'll go over that in a second, how to do that. Find and contact relevant program managers about your innovation and the agency's funding priorities. So that's kind of second item. And then sign up for the next session and begin developing a quad chart is the last item. You won't be able to sign up for the next session, so I should have updated that slide, at least not yet, because it's so far out, but you can begin developing a quad chart. And you can always work with me on the quad chart as well. So what I would, for the first item, finding agencies that have funded innovations like yours, is to just go to sbir.gov. And right along the top, you'll see a thing called awards. And then you go to awards, and then you go to the list. And so it'll go through and it'll just list out, and you can use the search criteria over here to kind of narrow it down. So the only thing I did is I went sbir.gov, awards, list, and then I selected Nebraska, just because I was curious. So you can look here, and one of them is a multifunctional antioxidant to prevent noise-induced hearing loss. That makes sense that Department of Health and Human Services, probably specifically National Institutes of Health, funded that product or that concept, that phase 1. But when you look up here, pole-based solar mounting and tracking system for use in cattle production. I guess if I were to read that and think about what that product probably does, I would assume it had been the U.S. Department of Agriculture who had funded this. But it's actually Department of Energy. So that's when I'm thinking, all right, well, I want to participate in the SBIR road tour. This is my idea. This is my concept. And I want to take a meeting with Department of Ag and only Department of Ag because the application of my product is to cattle production. Except for, I would guess, the Department of Energy was interested in it from a pole-based solar, so that's what is, that's what's providing the energy to this system is a pole-based solar, photovoltaic or something like that. And so that must be the Department of Energy's interest in this and why they funded it. So to just think, it makes sense when you think about it, but wouldn't, maybe naturally spring to mind. Same thing with National Science Foundation. This is a drone-based technology to manage fires more safely, efficiently, and effectively. I wouldn't necessarily think of the National Science Foundation as, I would maybe think more with a wildfire management system that's drone-based. I guess I would kind of think that would be the Bureau of Labor Statistics or Bureau of Land Management, BLM. Maybe they would fund something like this. But it was the National Science Foundation. And so that's where it's just worth looking through and then using keywords that apply to your innovation, which agency has funded what in the past. So then once you know the agency, whether it's Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, Department of Transportation, what have you, now you have some keywords that you can use, and then I would just say Google. So you would go Department of Energy, SBIR, Program Manager, Department of, NIH, and NIH has a lot of these, so I would actually specifically go with NIDCD, which is a specific centers for within the National Institutes of Health, or it's a specific institute. So I would search who is the NIDCD SBIR Program Manager, and that's step 2. So once you've figured out which agency has funded in the past, then you want to reach out to the appropriate program director. This is just a list. NSF, National Science Foundation, makes their program managers very accessible. And so there's just a page that says, these are our program managers and program directors, and these are their topic areas. So if you have something that has to do with medical devices, you need to speak with Henry On. If you have something that has to do with computer systems or artificial intelligence, then Peter Atherton is going to be your contact, and their contact information is very helpfully provided underneath their pictures. Same thing with if it's an energy technology, then you need to speak with Anna Brady Estevez. So those are just, so that's just National Science Foundation, but then there are SBIR program managers throughout the federal agencies that you then could email and just kind of ask about their program, speak about past funding opportunities. So that's their awards that they have granted. So that's why it's worth doing your market research there to see what they've funded in the past and how yours is different or improves upon that, and whether they would be interested in funding your concept. So that's items 1 and items 2. And then the last thing is, then this is a quad chart. It's just a piece of paper with 4 quadrants, and the top left one is talking about your technology's development. What is kind of your concept? What is it that you are proposing? What's the idea here? The company introduction is then kind of a brief discussion of just who you are. What is your documented history of success? So that you would do that. The opportunity. So just like the application, which I talked about in the past, you've got the technology development. This would be your technical merit, your scientific and intellectual merit, that discussion there. The opportunity is then your broader impacts, your significance, your commercial potential. All of that is here in then this opposite opportunity section there. Then you need a discussion about your company, yourself, how many years have you been in operation and that kind of thing. And then the lower left is your research need. What's your ask? If you were to submit an SBIR application, what's the budget for it? What's the timeline? And what do you still need to know so that you have a viable product at the end of that of that timeline? So just kind of very specifically stating what's that deliverable, what will be delivered, and what's keeping you from being able to deliver that now. And so that's that will also come into play with Dawn Breaker. When you go through and rank which agencies you would like to have meetings with, then they will also ask for a quad chart. So it's helpful to not put that together on the fly, but to have that ready so you can upload it. And then when you have your meetings with the program managers, they will have your quad charts and have reviewed them, and then we'll have questions about them during your meeting. So they're trying to make the process as and make those discussions as meaningful as possible. So so these are your kind of 3 bits of homework, which I can help with. I can answer any additional questions you have at any time. So either now or later. So I'm just going to check if you have a question, you can submit it to the chat and I'll answer it for the group. You can talk to me offline as well. Josh Nickelcaddy, so my information is available on the website there. Or you can just kind of kind of ask in person too if you want to do that as well. So I know I'm probably right at the time, but I can hang out here for a few minutes still. I think that the session goes till 12:15. So if you have additional questions, then I'm here for a bit if you have those. So thanks so much for joining me, everyone. And oh, a question came in. All right. Let's make sure I can find the question. Someone has raised their hand, which is cool, but can you submit your question if you have it, and I'll try and answer it, or if you would like me to speak to you offline, then I can just make sure to reach out. Hopefully I'm not missing it here. Okay, and then I uploaded the handouts. So if you have any questions about that, but all the links are available there for you to kind of have access to that. And otherwise, I appreciate everyone tuning in today. And I apologize if I can't see your question. Then my email address, JNICHOLCADDY @unomaha.edu. I can text that here. I'll put that in the chat as well. So if you'd like to meet or just kind of discuss offline, then I'm available there as well. Hello, Mr. Howie.
Yes. Can you hear me?
You had your hand raised, so I was just making sure. Did you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering, has this session been recorded? I had to join 7 or 8 minutes into it and missed it.
Yeah, it's been recorded, so I gotta process that, and then I can send that out with everything else.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I think if that's all the questions, then like I just said, I'll get a recording done. I'll send it with my latest PowerPoints as well. And then if you have any additional questions, just don't hesitate to give me a ring or write me an email, and I will get to it as soon as possible. So thanks so much again. Have a good afternoon, and I really appreciate you guys coming out today. Bye.